Before sunrise, inside a small home in Cardwell, Missouri, a man picked up the phone and called 911. His voice did not sound like someone giving clear answers. It sounded confused, disoriented, almost as if he was trying to understand the scene at the same time as the operator. When a deputy arrived at the house, the man who came to the door was naked, unsettled, and apparently under the influence of something powerful. Inside that home, investigators would find his 63-year-old mother, Charlotte Sue Wilson, dead, and the man at the door, her son, would soon become the center of a case that began with a strange emergency call and ended years later with a life sentence. Let me tell you the story of Trevor John Huber, Charlotte Sue Wilson, and the morning a quiet Missouri home became the center of a murder investigation. The discovery. On December 21st, 2018, the first official signal that something was terribly wrong came from inside the home itself. Trevor John Huber called 911 from the house he shared with his mother in Cardwell, a small, rural community in Dunklin County, Missouri. From the beginning, the call was unusual. Huber did not present a clear, organized account of what had happened. He sounded confused, he seemed disoriented. And when law enforcement arrived, the scene became even more alarming. A deputy came to the residence and was met by Huber at the door. He was naked, visibly disturbed, and appeared to be under the influence of drugs. At that moment, officers did not yet have the full picture. They only knew they had been called to a home where something was seriously wrong. Then they went inside. Charlotte Sue Wilson was found dead in the home. She was 63 years old. She was Huber's mother, and according to the later investigation, the violence against her had taken place in the same house where she and her son had been living. Investigators would recover physical evidence from the residence, including a blood-covered hammer and a bloody knife believed to have been involved in the attack. They also recovered Charlotte's head inside the home. The details were deeply disturbing, but the question at the center of the case was simple and urgent. What had happened in that house before the 911 call? And why had Trevor Huber been the one to call for help? The investigation. The first hours of an investigation often matter most. In this case, officers had a crime scene, physical evidence, and a suspect still inside or near the home when they arrived. Huber was arrested at the scene. He was later charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. But investigators still had to understand the sequence of events. They needed to know whether the violence had been planned, whether it had happened during a sudden episode, and what Huber himself believed had happened. During a Mirandized interview, Huber spoke about drug use. He admitted that he had used methamphetamine in the period before the killing. Reports differ slightly on whether that was the day before or several days before, but the broader point remained consistent. Meth use was part of the investigation almost from the beginning. He also described the belief that his mother had been poisoning him. That detail would become one of the most important pieces in understanding the case. Not because it excused what happened, and not because it answered every question, but because it suggested that paranoia may have played a role. Investigators were dealing with a man who appeared disoriented, who had allegedly used meth, and who claimed to believe his own mother was a threat to him. One theory was that Huber had been experiencing a drug-induced paranoid episode. That theory would fit some of the known facts: the confusion on the 911 call, his condition when police arrived, and his statement about believing Charlotte was poisoning him. But a theory is not the same as a complete answer. Drug use can explain a state of mind. It cannot erase the evidence, and it cannot undo the fact that Charlotte Wilson was killed in her own home. Then came one of the strangest moments in the case. According to reporting on the investigation, Huber wrote the words, "I killed my mother," on a piece of paper. Then he tore it up and swallowed it. That act did not make the evidence disappear. Instead, it became another haunting detail in a case already filled with troubling questions. Was he trying to hide a confession? Was he acting out of panic? Was he still confused and unstable? Or did he fully understand the meaning of what he had written? The public record does not answer every part of that moment. But investigators did not rely on one note alone. They had the 911 call. They had Huber's condition at the scene. They had his statements. They had the weapons recovered from the home. They had the location of Charlotte's body. And they had the broader timeline built from the morning of December 21st. From the outside, the case appeared direct. The suspect was at the scene. The victim was his mother. The physical evidence was inside the residence, and Huber had made statements connecting himself to the killing. But even when the evidence is strong, the legal process can take years. The breakthrough. For Charlotte Wilson's family and community, the wait for a final outcome did not end quickly. Huber remained in custody after his arrest in 2018. The case moved through the court system, and years passed before the final trial outcome. In May of 2026, Trevor John Huber went before the court in Dunklin County for a bench trial. A bench trial means there is no jury deciding the verdict. Instead, the judge hears the evidence and reaches a decision. The trial lasted 2 days, on May 18th and May 19th, 2026. By then, Huber was 43 years old. He had been 36 at the time of the crime. Charlotte Wilson had been gone for more than 7 years. After hearing the evidence, the judge found Huber guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced immediately to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That sentence closed the central legal question. The court had found that Trevor John Huber was responsible for the murder of his mother. But some parts of the story remained difficult to process. The evidence pointed to Huber. The case ended in conviction. The sentence was severe and final, yet the emotional question remains much harder. How does a home shared by a mother and son become the scene of such violence? The known facts suggest a tragic collision of family, isolation, drug use, and paranoia. But the exact emotional history inside that house is not fully known. Public reporting gives only fragments. A small town, a shared residence, a 911 call, a man in a disturbed state, and a mother who did not survive. There is no public evidence of a large conspiracy. No alternate suspect has emerged in mainstream reporting. No major contradiction has changed the basic outline of the case. What remains is the image of a son calling 911 from the same place where investigators would find his mother dead. For true crime audiences, it can be tempting to focus only on the most shocking detail. But behind every detail in this case was a real person. Charlotte Sue Wilson was not just a victim in a headline. She was a 63-year-old woman killed inside her own home. And the court's final decision, years later, did not bring her back. It only answered the legal question of who was responsible. Trevor John Huber will spend the rest of his life in prison without parole. The case that began with a confusing emergency call in December of 2018 ended with a life sentence in May of 2026. But the deeper warning remains. Sometimes, the most dangerous moment does not arrive with a stranger at the door. Sometimes it comes from inside the home, from a mind unraveling, from warning signs no one fully understands, until it is too late. And by the time the call for help is finally made, the silence inside the house has already become the evidence.